Scott McCready, CEO of Soul Cyber, and as you all know, we're doing security shorts. And the goal of these videos is to, within 10 minutes, to get to a critical topic that a lot of customers ask us about, to try to really frame it up in a very clear, concise manner. And so today, we're very excited to have Anthony D'Agostino with us today. He's a 20-year veteran inside of cyber, inside of tech, and inside the insurance organization. And he's going to talk to us a little bit about cyber insurance. And what does that mean? And how does that help organizations in the small and medium enterprise? As this is a topic that traditionally was thought of as being really useful for big companies. But as we move forward through the technical journey that we're all on, it's becoming significantly more impactful to small and medium enterprises. So with that, Anthony, thanks for joining us. Is there anything you want to share on yourself as far as an intro to your background, your experience?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. No, really happy to be here. And like you said, I spent 20 years and seen everything in the cyber and technology insurance space. I was front lines on the target breach and worked with some of the biggest banks in the world in their risk management. So this is definitely a topic near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, I really appreciate having you. It's when you get to technical topics like cyber insurance, it's always great to have people that obviously have a background, but can explain it in concise manner. So really appreciate you joining me. So one of the things that we get asked about a lot, especially in the small and medium enterprise space, is tell us about cyber insurance. Like, what does it mean? Does it matter to us? Obviously, large companies have it. So, I'd love for you just sort of frame up what does cyber insurance mean, and especially if you're thinking if as a small and medium enterprise, what does it mean to you, and what should they think about when it comes to cyber insurance?
Sure. So cyber insurance is an insurance for cybersecurity and privacy incidents. It protects financial loss against these types of issues. So whether it's privacy liability or it's incident response cost or business interruption, it's really that financial impact of having an incident and how it affects your organization. Now, cyber insurance is like any other insurance, and why we buy homeowners or renters insurance or property insurance. It protects the balance sheet, so it allows you to transfer that loss and that financial impact away from you and into an insurance provider. It's really grown over the past 20 some years, probably 22, 23 years when it's really been around. These last few years, it's really, really grown in importance. Number one, just from the headlines that you see, there's a lot more incidents. Ransomware attacks are costing companies a lot more money, and it does protect companies' balance sheets. But I think where cyber insurance has really improved over the last couple of years is allowing companies to better protect themselves and really look at what are the controls that can best mitigate against having the loss in the first place. So not only does it transfer the risk from the balance sheet, but it can also provide services and risk mitigation techniques to really protect you.
So that makes sense to me. But if some of our audience may be thinking, that sounds great if you're Goldman Sachs or Bank of America. So if you're a small, medium enterprise, if you're 50 seats to 2,000 seats, what's the risk to them? And do they need all of this? Why does it matter to them?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing, so for an organization to think about is number one, and we hear this all the time, what are the critical assets? What are the crown jewels? So what would really hurt your organization? Now, everybody always jumps to PII and how much data am I holding? And that's true, but that's not the whole piece. It could also be what's critical to my business. And if my website goes down, am I out income? And will I have a business interruption loss? So number one, you really need to define if something happened to me from a security or a privacy event, what's going to impact me financially? And if you do have a material impact, or if that answer is yes, it could really hurt me, then you should think about buying cyber insurance. And cyber insurance can really be built a number of different ways, and it can be tailored to what your operational needs are. And look, at the end of the day, it can be tailored to what your budget is because finances only go so far. But once you deem the need for cyber insurance, then it really gets into what are some of the key controls that you have in place or you don't have in place to get you the best coverage. And I think this is where the insurance landscape has really changed over the last 18 months, where insurance companies require organizations, regardless of their size, to have certain controls in place to get the best coverage.
And I want to dig into that maybe on the next question because I think that is a unique aspect that most people don't know about. But what I hear you saying on the previous answer is that a lot of organizations don't really understand that if they're down for a day or 2 days, maybe you're a small manufacturing company, or maybe you're, um, you know, in some space that they think, well, I'm not really at risk of an attack. And then all of a sudden something happens, they get ransomed, and now there's a significant cost associated with that. I think there's a stat that's half of the companies that are in the small medium enterprise space that get breached have a risk to their overall business if they don't have cyber insurance in place.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was a claim study done not long ago where it looked at the average size of a ransomware demand and then looked at some of the ancillary costs around it, and it was staggering. So the average ransomware cost, and it was a pure average across companies of all sizes, but it did skew towards the middle market space. There's companies with about 25 million up to 700 or so million in revenue, and the average ransomware demand, and it's after being negotiated down and what was ultimately paid to the bad actors, was about $1 million. And when you start to add up the forensics costs and the legal fees, it was another $400,000 to $500,000. To your point, the staggering part was for the companies that were affected, like manufacturers or technology companies, that business interruption loss. So they're locked up, their systems are down, and they're just losing net income. That was close to a $5 million loss. So yeah, the ransomware payment is one thing, the legal fees and the expenses is another. But that business interruption, and I've worked with some companies in the past. Actually, I worked with a custom cabinet manufacturer who was down for 3 weeks, and it was close to a $7 million loss of just losing revenue because their supply lines and their manufacturing lines were completely taken down. So it can be hurtful.
Makes sense. So one of the things I like to ask is like, what don't people know, or what's a misconception out there around the topic? So in this particular case, obviously cyber insurance. I know you talked briefly about, we tend to think about insurance as we do with cars or auto or homeowners or what have you, but you talked about like the technology that cyber insurance helps deliver. Can you talk maybe a little bit about known misconceptions about cyber insurance and if that plays into it?
Yeah, so two things come to mind. One, there definitely is a misconception around cyber insurance. The other one is just organizations that I've talked to over a long period of time. There's one recurring theme that seems to keep coming up that companies haven't really fully grasped, which is fascinating. That ties into cyber insurance. But the one big misconception is cyber insurance doesn't work. You hear that a lot. You do see headlines around big companies suing their insurance companies because it didn't cover a ransomware attack or a big business interruption. I can tell you from my experience and companies I've worked with in the past, cyber claims are typically covered about 99% of the time. Yes, there are some that are thrown out for exclusions. The ones that you've seen in the news where it says insurance isn't paying or it says cyber insurance isn't paying, it usually is not cyber insurance. It's usually a property policy with a cyber endorsement added to it, or a general liability policy with some elements of cyber. It's not what we call an affirmative cyber insurance policy. So it's really important. Going back to your initial question of what do companies need to be aware of, if you have the exposure and you deem the need for cyber insurance, don't try putting it on your directors and officers insurance or adding something to your property insurance. Buy an affirmative cyber insurance policy. That's one thing. The other thing, going back to what don't they know, or what do companies need to know, and I just have to say this more as a public service announcement because I've been talking about this for 20 years and the same thing keeps coming up. Have and test your incident response plan, and insurance companies do look for this. But so many companies say they have the plan, but nobody really tests it. It's kind of like the Mike Tyson saying, like everybody has a plan until they're punched in the face. It really is true. Companies say they have the plan, then they have an incident, and people are scrambling and have no idea what to do.
Yeah, good advice there. So, Anthony, I know a lot of the companies we talk with, they're thinking about cyber insurance. They haven't really gone down the path, and it tends to be a little bit of the scary black box. So maybe you can just take a minute and say, if you've never had cyber insurance, like, should they be worried? Is it easy? Do they talk to you? Like, walk that through and maybe dispel some of the concerns out there.
Yeah, so if you're thinking about getting cyber insurance, or even if you purchase cyber insurance now, and if you're going through a renewal, I feel for you. I mean, premiums are increasing drastically, coverage is being clawed back. Um, think about it in a few steps. I mean, number one, I'm going to go back to know your exposure. What's going to hurt if something happens? Number two, have a really good insurance broker. Your insurance broker should understand cyber insurance, should have some expertise. They should be able to help you navigate through what coverage you need, who is the best insurance carrier for you. Some of these insurance companies give you stipends or pay for certain proactive services, and you can look into that. The next part is analytics. There's actually really good cyber insurance analytics and cyber risk analytics out there that can help you ascertain how much should you even buy. Sometimes it's contractually driven. Maybe a big customer of yours is telling you need a certain amount of insurance, but these analytics can tell you what a bad day looks like and how much insurance you should think about having. But then it goes through the application process. And this is where it really gets into a self assessment on where you're weak and where you're strong. And the insurance companies are going to look at your key controls. I'll get into that in a minute. But also how big you are from a revenue standpoint, from an employee base, where are you doing business, what industry are you in? And then it really starts to look at your overall security posture.
So if you're new, there's obviously some components in the application process, but the good point about all that is good broker is going to help you through that, make sure you understand what's happening, and then set you up with a somebody to underwrite you in a great and positive manner. So don't be, I guess the summary there is don't be worried about it. Just go ahead and start the process and get yourself into a position where you can get that risk sort of offloaded and moved over to somebody who deals with it on a regular basis.
Yeah, absolutely. It's starting that conversation. I mean, the key thing where 3 years ago, if we were talking, I'd just say, hey, make sure you have your data encrypted, know how many records you're holding, fill out the application, you'll get some really good quotes. Well, that was 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And now with ransomware increasing, we've seen the amounts of demand skyrocketing, and you've probably seen it in the news, or many people have seen it in the news. Cyber insurance premiums are through the roof because for the last 20 years, it was all data breach driven. And yeah, we dealt with a little bit of DDoS in the mid 2000s, and then got back to data breach driven. So insurance companies kept underwriting to data breach risk and making sure that they understood how many records a company held. And well, if they lost those records, how much would it cost? Now you have ransomware, and that wasn't really underwritten to the right way. The weaknesses and the vulnerabilities around ransomware weren't really looked at. So now all of a sudden, the insurance companies are saying, wow, we need to re-underwrite things. We need to ask some new questions. And the way we were pricing before is not working for us now. So we're jacking up the premiums. So now we got into that space. So if you're a new buyer coming into this, or again, if you're going through a renewal, there's also some key controls that the insurance companies are looking for. And I think it's critical to hone in on that.
Yeah, makes sense. Obviously, Soul Cyber on our side, we help a lot of companies with some of those controls to make that process easier and to get discounts and things along those lines to try to make it simple. But here, Anthony, I want to thank you for the time. I'll leave it to you if there's anything you want to summarize with as we sort of wrap up here. We want to keep this usually under 10 minutes. Any final thoughts on your side?
Yeah, I mean, the critical controls are key. And like you said, Soul Cyber offers some really good controls that can cover off a lot of those that are needed. And obviously, outsourcing those types of controls and those endpoint solutions saves money, saves time, saves intellectual capital, and can get you better deals on insurance. So I think it's critical to make sure that you have those key things in place to get the best insurance coverage that you have. And at Converge, that's always something we're happy to help with.
Perfect. Anthony, thanks for the time. Really appreciate it. And have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Hopefully, this was really useful and interesting, and Anthony was able to share something that you found helpful to your business. And with that, we'll leave you until the next Security Shorts with Scott.